Jasmine Washington stands trembling in the airport terminal, her phone recording as airline executives apologize profusely, offering her family lifetime free flights. Her 7-year-old daughter Zoe beams shyly as passengers and staff applaud her courage. Just 48 hours earlier, what should have been a routine flight had spiraled into a nightmare at 30,000 feet that would change the airline industry forever. Before we dive into this incredible true story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to hear more stories of everyday heroes standing up against injustice. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Dr. Jasmine Washington checked her watch for the third time as she guided her daughter Zoe through Atlanta International Airport's bustling terminal. As the chief pediatric surgeon at Grady Memorial Hospital, punctuality was practically coded into her DNA. Today's first-class tickets to Los Angeles were a rare treat, a chance for mother and daughter to attend Jasmine's sister's wedding after months of grueling hospital shifts. "Mom, do you think they'll have those cookies again? The ones with chocolate chips?" Zoe bounced alongside her mother, her bright yellow backpack bobbing with each step. At 7 years old, Zoe Washington was already showing signs of her mother's intelligence and observant nature, though with an extra dose of outspokenness that sometimes caught Jasmine off guard. "I hope so, sweetheart. But remember, it's a different airline this time." Jasmine smiled down at her daughter, her heart swelling with pride. Raising Zoe as a single mother while climbing the medical career ladder hadn't been easy, but moments like these made everything worthwhile. Boarding went smoothly. Their first-class seats were comfortable, and Jasmine settled in, hoping for a peaceful flight. As a black woman who had fought her way through the overwhelmingly white medical establishment, she developed a thick skin against the subtle and not-so-subtle forms of discrimination that peppered her daily existence. But today was about Zoe and creating happy memories, not navigating microaggressions. The flight attendant working their section, a white woman in her mid-40s with a name tag reading Heather Reynolds, moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency. Jasmine noticed immediately how Heather's demeanor changed when interacting with her versus the other passengers. While the white businessman across the aisle received a warm smile and attentive service, Heather's expression cooled noticeably when addressing Jasmine, her tone clipped and impersonal. "Excuse me," Jasmine called politely after Heather had passed their row for the third time without acknowledging her raised hand. "Could we get some water, please?" "I'll be with you shortly," Heather replied without making eye contact, before immediately turning to ask the white couple behind Jasmine if they needed anything. Zoe's eyes darted between her mother and the flight attendant, her small brow furrowing. When Heather finally returned 20 minutes later with a single plastic cup of water, Zoe had already taken out her journal and begun writing. It was a habit Jasmine had encouraged, teaching her daughter to process her feelings through words. "What are you writing about, sweetie?" Jasmine asked, trying to mask her frustration at being repeatedly overlooked. "I'm keeping track," Zoe whispered, her pencil moving across the page in neat rows. "Like you taught me." An hour into the flight, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Jasmine had requested a blanket that never arrived. Her call button went unanswered for nearly 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Heather fawned over other first-class passengers, chatting amiably and anticipating their needs. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Heather asked pointedly when Jasmine requested a magazine from the first-class selection. "These amenities are for first-class passengers only." Jasmine felt heat rise in her cheeks as nearby passengers glanced over. "Yes, I'm sure. Seat 3A, as marked on my boarding pass." She kept her voice measured and professional, the same tone she used when dealing with difficult colleagues at the hospital. "Mom," Zoe whispered, tugging at Jasmine's sleeve. She didn't ask anyone else that question. "Just you." The breaking point came during the meal service. As Heather served drinks, her elbow knocked against Jasmine's arm, spilling red wine across her white blouse. Instead of apologizing, Heather merely tossed a few napkins in Jasmine's direction and continued serving. "Excuse me," Jasmine finally spoke up, her patience exhausted. "I've been patient, but your service has been unacceptable. I've been ignored, questioned, and now my clothes are stained without so much as an apology." The cabin fell quiet as passengers turned to observe the confrontation. Zoe sat perfectly still, her journal open on her lap, watching everything with wide, perceptive eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about," Heather replied, her voice carrying across the now silent first-class cabin. "I've been providing the same level of service to all passengers." Jasmine took a deep breath, summoning the same calm she maintained during surgical emergencies. "That's simply not true. You've consistently ignored my requests while promptly attending to other passengers. You questioned whether I belonged in first class. And just now, you spilled wine on me and didn't apologize." "Look," Heather's voice took on a defensive edge, "if you're going to play the race card." "I haven't mentioned race," Jasmine interrupted, her voice firm but controlled. "I'm simply stating observable facts about the disparity in service." Around them, passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A middle-aged white woman 2 rows ahead pretended to be absorbed in her magazine. The businessman across the aisle suddenly became very interested in his laptop screen. But not everyone looked away. An elderly white couple seated directly behind Jasmine exchanged knowing glances, the woman's mouth set in a disapproving line as she watched Heather's behavior. "I think you're being overly sensitive," Heather snapped, crossing her arms. "Perhaps you're just not used to flying first class." The thinly veiled insult hung in the air. Zoe's pencil stopped moving across her journal page, her small body tensing beside her mother. A second flight attendant, a white man with a name tag reading Greg Peters, approached from the galley. Instead of de-escalating the situation, he immediately positioned himself beside Heather, creating a united front against Jasmine. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, directing the question at Heather rather than Jasmine. "This passenger is being difficult," Heather replied before Jasmine could speak. "Making accusations." "I see," Greg nodded, not bothering to hear Jasmine's side. "Ma'am, we need to maintain a pleasant environment for all our passengers. If you can't do that." "Excuse me." The voice came from behind Jasmine. The elderly white woman had stood up, her hand resting on the back of Jasmine's seat. "My husband and I have been observing this entire flight. This young lady has been treated poorly from the moment we boarded. She's been nothing but polite while being repeatedly ignored." Heather's face flushed red. "Mrs. Fitzgerald, I assure you." "Don't bother, dear," Mrs. Fitzgerald cut her off. "We've flown this airline for 40 years. We know what good service looks like, and this isn't it." The unexpected alliance momentarily threw Heather off balance. Recovering quickly, she reached for the cabin phone. "I'm going to have to call the captain about this disruption." "Disruption?" Jasmine echoed in disbelief. "I'm sitting in my assigned seat, speaking in a normal tone, addressing a legitimate complaint." "Are you a doctor?" Greg suddenly asked, noticing the medical journal peeking out from Jasmine's bag. "Yes, I'm the chief pediatric surgeon at Grady Memorial," Jasmine replied, taken aback by the abrupt change in subject. Greg and Heather exchanged skeptical glances. "Do you have credentials to prove that?" Heather asked. The implication was clear, and it stung. Even in her white-stained blouse, even with her medical ID badge clearly visible on her lanyard, her professional status was being questioned in a way that would never happen to her white colleagues. Zoe had gone very still, her eyes wide with anxiety as she watched her mother being belittled. Her small hand clutched her journal tightly, knuckles turning white. "I don't need to prove my credentials to receive basic courtesy," Jasmine replied evenly. "But yes, my hospital ID is right here." She lifted the lanyard, maintaining eye contact with Heather. The confrontation was no longer just about poor service. It had escalated into something far more insidious, a public challenging of Jasmine's dignity, her truthfulness, her very right to occupy the space she had rightfully paid for. The tension in the cabin had reached a breaking point. Other passengers were now openly watching the confrontation, some with expressions of discomfort, others with unmistakable interest, and a few with phones discreetly raised. "I've had enough of this," Heather declared, her voice rising. "I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I've never been spoken to like this. And I've never been treated like this on a flight," Jasmine countered, maintaining her composure despite the growing hostility. "All I'm asking for is the same respect you've shown other passengers." Something in Heather's expression shifted. Her professional veneer cracked completely, revealing raw anger beneath. "You people always think you're entitled to special treatment." The racist subtext of, "you people," hung in the air like a toxic cloud. A collective intake of breath rippled through the cabin. Jasmine felt her heart hammering against her ribs but refused to lower her gaze. "That's a highly inappropriate comment," Jasmine stated, her voice remarkably steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "And it makes your bias quite clear." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Heather's face contorted with rage, her professional mask completely abandoned. She lunged forward, right hand raised, palm open, on a direct course for Jasmine's face. Jasmine flinched instinctively, raising her arm to shield herself, but the blow never landed. In a blur of movement, Zoe had sprung from her seat, positioning herself between her mother and the flight attendant. "Don't you hurt my mommy," she cried out, her small voice ringing with a clarity and conviction that stopped Heather mid-motion. Heather froze, hands still raised, suddenly confronted with the reality of what she was about to do, and to whom. The sight of the small child defending her mother seemed to momentarily shock her back to her senses. Gasps erupted throughout the cabin. The elderly Mrs. Fitzgerald had her hand pressed to her mouth in horror. Multiple passengers now had their phones up, recording openly. "She tried to hit her," someone exclaimed from a few rows back. "With her child right there," another voice added incredulously. A tall black man in a crisp suit rose from his seat near the front of the cabin, moving with purposeful strides toward the confrontation. "Federal Air Marshal Ryan Brooks," he announced, displaying his credentials. "I need everyone to calm down immediately." The revelation that a federal officer had witnessed the entire incident sent visible shock through Heather's body. She lowered her hand slowly, taking a step back. "I wasn't going to," she began weakly. "I saw exactly what happened," Air Marshal Brooks interrupted firmly. As did at least a dozen other witnesses. He turned to Jasmine. "Ma'am, are you and your daughter all right?" Before Jasmine could answer, the cabin intercom crackled to life. "This is Captain Warren Mitchell speaking. Would Flight Attendant Reynolds and the passenger in 3A please come to the forward galley immediately?" Jasmine looked down at Zoe, who was trembling slightly but standing tall, her small face set with determination. "I need to go speak with the captain, sweetie. Would you be okay sitting with Mrs. Fitzgerald for a few minutes?" Zoe shook her head vigorously. "I'm coming with you, Mom. I saw everything." She clutched her journal tightly to her chest, as if it contained vital evidence, which, Jasmine would soon discover, it did. "Very well," Air Marshal Brooks nodded. "I'll escort you both." He positioned himself between Jasmine and Heather as they made their way to the front of the aircraft, every eye in the cabin following their progress. Captain Warren Mitchell stood in the cramped forward galley, his weathered face unreadable beneath his captain's cap. Beside him, First Officer Rachel Turner observed the gathering tension with alert eyes. The contrast between the two was striking, Mitchell in his 60s, posture rigid with decades of authority, while Turner appeared to be in her mid-30s, her presence more measured and observant. "I understand we have a situation," Mitchell began, his tone suggesting he viewed this as an inconvenience rather than a serious incident. "Ms. Reynolds?" Jasmine noted the immediate deference to the flight attendant, the assumption that her version would come first. She also caught the subtle dismissal in being referred to as the passenger, while Heather received the courtesy of her name. "Captain, this passenger has been confrontational throughout the flight," Heather began, her voice steadier now that she had authority figures backing her. "She's made unfounded accusations about my service and disrupted the cabin." "That's not what happened," Zoe interjected before Jasmine could speak, her clear voice startling the adults. "She's been mean to my mom the whole time, and she just tried to hit her." Captain Mitchell's gaze dropped to Zoe, a flicker of surprise crossing his features before he composed himself. "Young lady, the grown-ups are talking now." "My daughter is a witness to what occurred," Jasmine stated firmly. "And she's not the only one. Multiple passengers observed Ms. Reynolds consistently ignoring my requests while promptly attending to others. When I calmly addressed this disparity, she escalated the situation and ultimately attempted to physically assault me." Mitchell's expression hardened. "That's a very serious accusation. Ms. Reynolds has been with this airline for 20 years without incident. Without documented incidents, Air Marshal Brooks corrected quietly. I witnessed the attempted assault myself, Captain. As did numerous passengers who now have video evidence. A brief flicker of concern crossed Mitchell's face. Even so, we can't have disruptions on this aircraft. Ms. Washington. Dar. Washington, Jasmine corrected. Dr. Washington, Mitchell continued, the correction clearly irritating him. I need to be certain you can return to your seat without further confrontation. Otherwise, we may need to consider other arrangements upon landing. The threat was thinly veiled: back down or face potential removal from the aircraft, possibly even arrest. It was a power play Jasmine had encountered before in different contexts, the assumption that she, not the aggressor, needed to accommodate and adjust. Are you suggesting that after being ignored, insulted, and nearly assaulted, I'm the one who needs to modify my behavior? Jasmine asked incredulously. I'm suggesting that the safety of all passengers is my primary concern, Mitchell replied stiffly. And what about our safety? Zoe's voice rang out again, stronger this time. The adults turned to look at her as she opened her journal, flipping through pages filled with careful handwriting. I wrote down everything. Ms. Reynolds helped the man in 2C 4 times before she helped my mom once. She asked my mom if she was in the right seat but didn't ask anyone else that. She called the white lady in 4B ma'am, but called my mom, you, or nothing at all. Silence fell over the galley as Zoe continued, her observations detailed and damning. When she spilled the drink, she said sorry to the man in 3C when some splashed on his shoe, but she didn't say anything to my mom when it got all over her shirt. Jasmine felt a complex mixture of emotions, fierce pride in her daughter's perceptiveness and courage, alongside deep sadness that at 7 years old, Zoe was already so attuned to the nuances of racial discrimination. She remembered their conversations at home, the careful ways she tried to prepare Zoe for a world that wouldn't always treat her fairly while still preserving her innocence and sense of self-worth. Mom always says we should stand up straight and speak clearly when something's not right, Zoe continued, looking up at Captain Mitchell. And this wasn't right. First Officer Turner, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward slightly. Captain, with all due respect, I observed some of Ms. Reynolds' interactions with Dr. Washington during my cabin check earlier. There was a noticeable difference in how she addressed different passengers. Mitchell's expression tightened, clearly not appreciating his co-pilot's input. Before he could respond, the galley curtain parted, and Mrs. Fitzgerald appeared, her husband standing supportively behind her. Captain, she began without preamble, my husband Harold and I have witnessed the entire incident. We've been executive platinum members with this airline for over 30 years, and I must say, the treatment Dr. Washington received was appalling. Several other passengers are prepared to provide statements as well. The power dynamic was shifting. What had begun as an isolated confrontation was evolving into something larger, with witnesses coming forward and alliances forming. Captain Mitchell now faced a decision: continue backing his crew member despite mounting evidence, or acknowledge the seriousness of what had occurred. This will all be properly documented, he finally stated, though his tone suggested he considered it a formality rather than a pursuit of justice. Ms. Reynolds, please take your break now. Greg will cover your section for the remainder of the flight. That's it? Jasmine questioned. She attempted to physically assault me in front of my child, and she gets a break. Dr. Washington, Mitchell's voice took on a warning tone, this incident will be reviewed through the appropriate channels. But right now, I need to ensure this flight proceeds without further disruption. I suggest you return to your seat and allow us to do our jobs. This will go nowhere, he added in a lower voice. These things rarely do. Was the captain right? Would this incident be swept under the rug like so many others? What do you think, should Jasmine accept the captain's handling of the situation or push for more immediate action? Comment number 1 if you believe she should stand her ground, or number 2 if you think she should strategically back down and fight the battle after landing. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to hear how this shocking confrontation continues to unfold. Did Zoe's detailed journal really make a difference? What would you have done in Jasmine's position? Let me know in the comments below, and let's continue with what happened next. Jasmine returned to her seat with Zoe, acutely aware of the eyes tracking their movement through the cabin. The atmosphere had shifted palpably, where before there had been indifference or discomfort, now there were expressions of concern, curiosity, and in some cases, clear support. "Are you okay, Mom?" Zoe whispered as they settled back into their seats, her small hand slipping into Jasmine's. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Jasmine assured her, though the wine stain on her blouse and the tremor in her fingers told a different story. The confrontation had left her physically and emotionally drained. As a black woman in medicine, she'd developed strategies for addressing discrimination in professional settings, but this public humiliation, and the threat to her physical safety, had crossed into territory that felt both shocking and sickeningly familiar. Heather was nowhere to be seen, having been relegated to the back galley. Greg now served the first-class cabin with exaggerated courtesy, though he noticeably avoided eye contact with Jasmine. 10 minutes after they returned to their seats, a man in a crisp business suit from across the aisle leaned toward them. "Excuse me," he said quietly, extending his hand. "Tyler Bennett. I want you to know I recorded the entire incident." Jasmine looked up in surprise. Bennett, a white man in his 40s who had earlier been absorbed in his laptop, now offered a small smile of solidarity. "I work as a corporate ethics consultant," he continued, keeping his voice low. "What happened to you was textbook discrimination, followed by an attempted cover-up. I've already backed up the video to cloud storage." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, genuinely moved by the unexpected support. Bennett wasn't the only one. Within minutes, a black woman from a few rows back approached. "Keisha Johnson," she introduced herself. "I'm a high school teacher from Atlanta. My students and I just completed a unit on bystander intervention. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't practice what I preach." She slipped Jasmine a business card. "I've got footage too, and I'm happy to provide a witness statement." The elderly couple, Harold and Elaine Fitzgerald, turned in their seats to join the growing conversation. "We've already contacted our son," Elaine informed them. "He's an attorney with a civil rights practice in Los Angeles. He'll meet us at the airport if you'd like." What had begun as an isolating experience was transforming into something else entirely, a spontaneous coalition of concerned passengers determined to ensure accountability. "We should create a group text," Bennett suggested, "to coordinate our statements and make sure the airline can't dismiss this." While the adults exchanged contact information, Zoe had struck up a conversation with a girl about her age seated across the aisle with her father. "I showed her my journal," Zoe explained when Jasmine glanced over questioningly. "Lily says she saw the mean lady ignore us too." Lily nodded vigorously, her pigtails bouncing. "My dad says what happened was wrong and that you were very brave," she told Zoe. As the impromptu support network took shape, a different flight attendant approached, a Latina woman whose name tag read Maria Gonzalez. Unlike her colleagues, she carried herself with genuine professional warmth. "Dr. Washington," she said softly, crouching beside Jasmine's seat to speak privately. "I want you to know that not all of us are like Heather. Some of us have been trying to report her behavior for years." "Years?" Jasmine echoed in disbelief. Maria nodded grimly. "There's a pattern. The airline has received complaints before, but they're usually resolved with vouchers and NDAs." She glanced around cautiously. "I'm risking my job telling you this, but what happened to you happens too often. Usually, there isn't a cabin full of witnesses willing to speak up." The conversation was interrupted by an announcement that the in-flight Wi-Fi was now operational. Within minutes, Bennett had connected his laptop and was frowning at his screen. "You might want to see this," he said, turning the screen toward Jasmine. The hashtag Justice for Jasmine and Zoe was already trending on Twitter. Someone, likely a passenger from economy class who'd witnessed the galley confrontation, had posted a partial account of the incident. The social media response was exploding. "People are digging into the airline's history," Bennett explained, scrolling through the feed. "There have been at least 3 discrimination lawsuits in the past 5 years, all settled out of court with confidentiality agreements." Jasmine felt a complex mix of emotions. On one hand, the public support was validating. On the other, she worried about the implications for Zoe, who was too young to navigate the complexities of becoming the center of a viral story about racism. "Mom," Zoe said, tugging at Jasmine's sleeve and interrupting her thoughts. "Ms. Maria gave me this." She held up a small folded note. Written inside was a phone number and a simple message: 15 incidents documented. Call me if you need more information. As the flight continued toward Los Angeles, the cabin had transformed from a site of isolation and humiliation to an unexpected community of support. Passengers who had initially looked away now approached to offer statements or express solidarity. The elderly Fitzgeralds shared stories of the civil rights movement they had witnessed firsthand. Keisha discussed the importance of documentation and narrative control. Bennett offered strategic advice on corporate accountability. By the time the captain announced their initial descent into Los Angeles, Jasmine had gone from being a lone voice to the center of a determined coalition. Whatever Captain Mitchell had meant by his dismissive, "This will go nowhere," it was already clear that this incident would not be so easily buried. What none of them realized yet was that the real battle was just beginning, and that the landing at LAX would throw them into a chaotic confrontation for which even Jasmine, with all her experience navigating discriminatory systems, couldn't be fully prepared. The aircraft touched down at LAX with a jolt that seemed to emphasize the tension running through the cabin. As they taxied toward the gate, Jasmine noticed unusual activity through the small oval window, not just the standard ground crew, but what appeared to be several uniformed police officers and individuals in airline management attire. "That's not normal," Tyler Bennett murmured, noticing her gaze. "They're mobilizing damage control." Captain Mitchell's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles International Airport. Local time is 2:15 p.m. with sunny skies and a temperature of 78 degrees. At this time, I must ask all passengers to remain seated upon arrival. We have a special procedure to follow today." The announcement sent a ripple of muttering through the cabin. Jasmine felt Zoe's hand tighten around hers. "It's okay, sweetie," she reassured her daughter, though her own anxiety was mounting. "We haven't done anything wrong." The aircraft docked at the gate. Instead of the usual announcements about collecting belongings, the cabin remained eerily quiet until Captain Mitchell emerged from the cockpit. He approached Jasmine's row with a fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dr. Washington," he began with forced politeness, "airline representatives would like to speak with you privately about today's incident. If you'd kindly deplane first." "Absolutely not," interjected Harold Fitzgerald from behind, rising to his feet despite his wife's attempt to restrain him. "This is textbook intimidation. They want to separate her from witnesses." Mitchell's smile tightened. "Sir, please remain seated until—" "I'm not deplaning without the other witnesses," Jasmine stated firmly, years of hospital politics having taught her the power dynamics of isolation. "Whatever needs to be discussed can happen with appropriate representation present." The situation reached an impasse, with Mitchell standing rigid in the aisle while passengers openly recorded the interaction on their phones. Finally, Air Marshal Brooks intervened. "Captain, I'll be escorting Dr. Washington and her daughter through the terminal as part of standard procedure following an in-flight security incident," he announced, his authoritative tone leaving no room for argument. "Any airline representatives can speak with them in the presence of myself and any witnesses Dr. Washington wishes to include." Mitchell's jaw worked silently for a moment before he gave a curt nod and returned to the cockpit. As soon as he departed, Maria Gonzalez leaned in quickly. "They've got PR people waiting in the jetway," she whispered. "Douglas Williams himself is here." "The CEO?" Bennett asked incredulously. "This has already escalated beyond normal protocols," Maria confirmed. "Someone high up must have seen the social media storm." What followed was unlike any deplaning process Jasmine had ever experienced. With Air Marshal Brooks leading and her newfound allies clustering protectively around her and Zoe, they exited into a jetway where, indeed, a group of suited individuals waited with tense expressions. Dr. Washington, a silver-haired man, stepped forward smoothly, hand extended. "Douglas Williams, CEO of Atlantic Airways. I want to personally assure you that we're taking this matter extremely seriously. If we could just step into our VIP lounge to discuss." "Mom," Zoe interrupted, her voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. They're trying to do what you call damage control instead of accountability. Like when Dr. Richards made a mistake in surgery and tried to talk to the family alone before the review board could meet. Several of the airline executives blinked in surprise at the child's perceptiveness. Jasmine felt a surge of pride through her anxiety. "My daughter is right," she stated. "Any discussion will need to happen with witnesses present, and I'd prefer to have legal representation as well." William's practiced smile faltered slightly. "We certainly respect your position, Doctor, but there's no need to make this more complicated than." "Excuse me." A new voice entered the conversation as a slim black woman in a TSA uniform approached. "I've been instructed to inform you that the airport security footage from both the aircraft and the terminal has been flagged for preservation as evidence in a potential federal investigation into violations of air transport safety regulations." This announcement clearly caught the airline representatives off guard. William's professional veneer cracked momentarily as he turned to confer urgently with his colleagues. Meanwhile, Keisha Johnson had been typing furiously on her phone. "Your colleagues at Grady Memorial are organizing," she informed Jasmine. "The chief of surgery just issued a statement of support. It's going viral." The situation was rapidly evolving beyond the airline's ability to contain it. What might once have been resolved with vouchers and private apologies was now playing out under the unforgiving spotlight of social media, with witnesses refusing to be silenced and institutional support rallying behind Jasmine. As they moved through the terminal, Jasmine became aware of people recording with their phones, some calling out words of encouragement. The story had somehow leapt beyond the confines of the aircraft and was spreading in real time. In the midst of the chaos, Zoe tugged at her mother's hand. "Can I show them my journal now?" she asked. "What's in your journal, sweetheart?" asked Elaine Fitzgerald gently. Zoe opened the colorful notebook she'd clutched throughout the ordeal. Inside were not just notes from the flight, but what appeared to be a methodical record spanning multiple pages, with dates, times, and detailed observations. "I've been keeping track since our trip to Grandma's last month," Zoe explained. "Mom always says that if something happens more than once, it's a pattern, not an accident." Jasmine stared in astonishment at her daughter's meticulous documentation, incidents on previous flights, in airports, at restaurants. Small moments of discrimination that Jasmine had weathered silently, hoping to shield Zoe from their ugliness, all recorded in a child's careful handwriting. "You saw all of that?" Jasmine asked softly, a lump forming in her throat. Zoe nodded solemnly. "I see how people treat you differently sometimes. I wanted to help prove it wasn't just in your head, like that man told you at the hospital." The airline representatives, who had regrouped and were approaching again with offers of private accommodations and discussions, fell silent as the child's journal was photographed and passed among the witnesses. What had begun as a single incident was revealed to be part of a pattern, one made undeniable through the eyes of a 7-year-old who had been watching all along. In that moment, standing in the bustling terminal with her daughter's hand in hers and strangers rallying to their defense, Jasmine realized they had crossed a threshold. There would be no quiet resolution, no NDA, no brushing this incident aside. Whether she had chosen it or not, they were now at the center of a conversation much larger than themselves. Douglas Williams cleared his throat, his expression now grave rather than placating. "Dar. Washington, it seems we have a great deal to discuss. Perhaps we should." He was interrupted by the chime of Jasmine's phone, a call from a number she didn't recognize. "Dr. Washington. This is Maya Rodriguez from CNN. We'd like to get your statement on the incident aboard Atlantic Airways Flight 1382 today." 24 hours after landing at LAX, Jasmine sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at her phone in disbelief. The screen displayed yet another message from a major news outlet requesting an interview. Outside, the muted sounds of Los Angeles traffic filtered through the heavy curtains she'd drawn shut for privacy. "Mom." Zoe's voice came from the bathroom doorway. "Can I watch cartoons now?" Jasmine looked up at her daughter, her heart clenching at the shadows under Zoe's eyes. Neither of them had slept well. "Of course, sweetie. Just keep the volume low, okay?" As Zoe settled on the opposite bed with the remote, Jasmine returned to scrolling through her notifications. The hashtag Justice for Jasmine and Zoe had generated over 2 million impressions overnight. Video clips from the flight had been featured on morning news shows across multiple networks. Her professional profile on the Grady Memorial Hospital website had received so much traffic that the server temporarily crashed. But alongside the overwhelming support came a disturbing undercurrent. Anonymous accounts questioned her story, suggested she provoked the incident for attention, or hurled racial slurs so vile that Jasmine had stopped reading comments entirely. The hotel room phone had rung so persistently with unwanted calls that management had finally disabled it. Her cell phone buzzed with an incoming call, her sister Monique, whose wedding they'd come to attend. "Jazz, are you watching the news? They're talking about you on every channel," Monique said as soon as Jasmine answered. "We're staying off television and social media for now," Jasmine replied, rubbing her temples against an encroaching headache. "It's too much, especially for Zoe." "How is she doing?" Jasmine glanced at her daughter, who was ostensibly watching cartoons but whose eyes occasionally darted toward her mother with concern beyond her years. "She's processing. I don't think either of us realized how big this would become." The wedding planner called, Monique continued hesitantly. "They're worried about paparazzi showing up if you attend on Saturday." The implication hung silently between them. Jasmine closed her eyes, feeling a fresh wave of emotion crash over her. "You want me to skip your wedding?" "No. I want you there," Monique insisted. "But maybe, we could arrange a private viewing for you instead of the ceremony itself. Just to be safe." Before Jasmine could respond, a notification slid across her screen, an email from Grady Memorial's administrative board requesting an urgent discussion regarding recent events and public relations considerations. "I need to call you back," she told Monique, a new worry forming as she opened the email. The message was carefully worded but unmistakable in its subtext. While the hospital supported her, in principle, there were concerns about the attention this incident has drawn and potential implications for patient confidence. They requested she extend her leave of absence until matters are resolved. In other words, make this go away or your career might suffer. A knock at the door made Jasmine jump. "Room service," called a voice. "We didn't order anything," Jasmine called back warily. "Compliments of Mr. Bennett," the voice replied. Tyler Bennett had been a steadfast ally since their landing, helping coordinate the growing network of witnesses and supporters. Cautiously, Jasmine approached the door and peered through the peephole. A hotel staff member stood outside with a covered tray. When she accepted the delivery, she found not only a meal but a sealed envelope. Inside was a business card for Eleanor Chen of Chen, Washington, and Barnes, one of the country's most prestigious civil rights law firms, along with a handwritten note, "My office, 3 p.m. today. Car will pick you up at 2:30. Bring Zoe and her journal. EC." As Jasmine was processing this development, her phone rang again, an unknown number that she almost ignored until something made her answer. "Dr. Washington. This is James Peterson from the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We've been following your situation and would like to offer our support and resources." The call had barely ended when another came in, this time from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Then the National Bar Association. Within an hour, Jasmine had been contacted by 5 major civil rights organizations offering pro bono representation. The David versus Goliath narrative was shifting. Atlantic Airways had resources and corporate power, but Jasmine now had institutional support rallying behind her. At precisely 2:30 p.m., a discreet town car arrived at the hotel's side entrance, allowing Jasmine and Zoe to avoid the small clutch of reporters gathered at the main lobby. By 3 p.m., they were seated in the impressive conference room of Chen, Washington, and Barnes, where Eleanor Chen, a formidable attorney known for winning landmark discrimination cases, laid out the situation with brutal clarity. "Atlantic Airways has already reached out with a settlement offer," Chen explained, sliding a document across the polished table. $500,000, conditional upon a non-disclosure agreement and a statement that the incident was a misunderstanding. Jasmine skimmed the document, her medical training allowing her to quickly process the dense legal text. "They want us to absolve the airline of any wrongdoing." "Precisely," Chen nodded. "It's a substantial offer designed to make this disappear quickly. Most clients in your position would be tempted to accept. And if we don't?" Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but her eyes reflected a steely determination. Then we prepare for a battle. The airline has a documented history of similar incidents that were swept under the rug with settlements like this one. But they've never faced a case with this much public attention and concrete evidence. While they spoke, Zoe sat quietly in a chair by the window, her journal open on her lap as she added new entries, continuing to document even now. "What about Heather Reynolds?" Jasmine asked. "Have there been consequences for her?" "She's been placed on administrative leave pending investigation," Chen replied, making air quotes. "But our research has uncovered something interesting. Ms. Reynolds has worked for 3 different airlines in the past decade. She left each previous position following customer complaints that mysteriously never made it into her personnel file. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about one flight attendant's actions, but about systemic failures that allowed such behavior to continue unchecked across the industry." As they discussed strategy, Jasmine's phone lit up with a text from her department chair at Grady Memorial. "Board meeting just ended. Administration pushing for you to resolve situation quickly. Threatening to review your contract. I'm fighting for you, but prepare for pressure." Jasmine showed the message to Chen, who frowned. Unfortunately, this is common. Institutions often prioritize quiet over justice. The question is, are you prepared for what fighting this might cost you professionally? The weight of the decision pressed down on Jasmine. She looked over at Zoe, who had fallen asleep in the comfortable chair, her journal still clutched protectively against her chest. What message would accepting the settlement send to her daughter? That standing up against discrimination was only worth it until it became inconvenient or costly. Yet she couldn't ignore the reality that a prolonged legal battle could impact her career, their financial security, and most importantly, Zoe's well-being. The media attention was already taking a toll on her daughter. Zoe had awakened crying at 3 a.m., worried that the mean people online would hurt them. "I need some time to think," Jasmine finally said. Later that night, after tucking Zoe into bed in their hotel room, Jasmine sat alone by the window, gazing out at the Los Angeles skyline as she weighed her options. The settlement offer would provide financial security and a quick end to the public scrutiny. Fighting would mean an uncertain outcome and continuing stress for both her and Zoe. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tyler Bennett. "Whatever you decide, we're all still behind you. This isn't just your fight anymore." Attached was a link to a video compilation of support messages from passengers on the flight, hospital colleagues, and even strangers moved by their story. The final clip showed Mrs. Fitzgerald speaking directly to the camera. "In my 78 years, I've seen what happens when good people stay silent. That young woman and her brave little girl deserve better than silence." As the video ended, Jasmine heard a small voice behind her. "Mom. Are we going to take the money and be quiet?" Jasmine turned to find Zoe standing in the doorway in her pajamas, her expression serious beyond her years. "I thought you were asleep," Jasmine said softly. "I couldn't." Zoe padded across the room and climbed into her mother's lap, something she hadn't done since she was 5. "I was thinking about what you always tell me." "What's that, sweetie?" "That sometimes doing the right thing is hard, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it." Zoe looked up at her mother with eyes that held both innocence and understanding. "If we take the money and don't tell everyone what happened, then it might happen to another mommy and little girl who don't have people to help them like we do." In that moment, hearing her own values reflected back through her daughter's perspective, Jasmine found clarity. The path forward wasn't about what was easiest or safest. It was about what aligned with the values she'd worked so hard to instill in Zoe. She reached for her phone and typed a message to Eleanor Chen. "We're not taking the settlement. Let's show them what accountability really means." "Mom, I have something to show you." Jasmine looked up from her conversation with Eleanor Chen as Zoe approached, her yellow backpack clutched tightly against her chest. 3 days had passed since they'd rejected Atlantic Airways' settlement offer, and they were gathered in Chen's office to prepare for their first formal statement to the press. "What is it, sweetie?" Jasmine asked, noting the unusual seriousness in her daughter's expression. Instead of answering, Zoe carefully unzipped her backpack and removed not just her journal, but a small digital tablet that Jasmine recognized as the one Zoe used for educational games and ebooks. "I didn't just write things down," Zoe explained, her voice quiet but steady as she placed the tablet on the conference table. "I took videos too." The adults in the room fell silent as Zoe navigated to a hidden folder labeled Evidence, and opened the first of what appeared to be dozens of video files. The screen showed a slightly shaky but clear recording of Heather Reynolds deliberately ignoring Jasmine's raised hand while attentively serving the white male passenger across the aisle. Another clip captured Heather's dismissive tone when questioning whether Jasmine belonged in first class. A third showed the wine spilling incident from an angle that clearly demonstrated it was no accident. "Zoe," Jasmine breathed, astonished. "When did you record these?" "Whenever you went to the bathroom or were looking at your medical papers," Zoe explained. "I pretended I was playing my alphabet game, but I was really documenting, like Detective Marquez does on your TV show." Eleanor Chen leaned forward, her professional composure momentarily replaced by undisguised amazement. "This is extraordinary. How many videos do you have?" 27 from our flight," Zoe replied matter-of-factly. "And 16 from other times when people were mean to Mom in public." While Chen and her associates excitedly reviewed the footage, Jasmine knelt beside her daughter, emotions flooding through her. "Zoe, I had no idea you were seeing all of this," she said softly. "I thought I was protecting you by not talking about these incidents." Zoe's small hand reached out to touch her mother's cheek. "I always see it, Mom. I just didn't want to make you sad by telling you I noticed." The revelation hit Jasmine like a physical blow. All the times she'd smiled through microaggressions, all the slights she'd pretended not to notice for Zoe's sake, her daughter had been silently bearing witness to every single one. As the legal team huddled over Zoe's evidence, Jasmine's phone buzzed with urgent messages. Tyler Bennett was forwarding additional videos that had just emerged online. Passengers from other sections of the plane had captured footage of the confrontation from different angles. The elderly Fitzgeralds had convinced several of their fellow first-class regulars to provide sworn statements about previous incidents they'd witnessed involving Heather Reynolds. Maria Gonzalez, the sympathetic flight attendant, had risked her job by providing internal complaint records that had supposedly been lost in the airline system. What had begun as one woman's stand against discrimination was evolving into a watershed moment for an entire industry. By midday, Eleanor Chen had scheduled a press conference. "We're not just fighting for compensation anymore," she explained to Jasmine. "We have an opportunity to demand systemic change in how airlines handle discrimination complaints." The press conference was set for 4 p.m. at a hotel near LAX. As they prepared, Chen received word that several major networks planned to broadcast live. Civil rights organizations had mobilized supporters to attend. Even celebrities were sharing the hashtag and expressing support. "Are you ready for this?" Chen asked Jasmine as they reviewed talking points. "Once we go public with these demands, there's no turning back." Jasmine glanced at Zoe, who was sitting nearby with one of the junior associates, carefully organizing her evidence for presentation. "I think we passed the point of no return the moment Heather raised her hand to me," she replied. "Now it's about making sure something good comes from a terrible situation." At precisely 4 p.m., Jasmine took the podium, Zoe standing proudly beside her. Cameras flashed and reporters called questions, but Jasmine maintained her composure, drawing on the same calm precision that served her in the operating room. 3 days ago, she began, "My 7-year-old daughter and I experienced something no passenger should ever face: discrimination, harassment, and ultimately attempted physical assault from an airline employee whose job was to ensure our safety and comfort." As Jasmine spoke, Eleanor Chen displayed selected clips from Zoe's videos on a large screen behind them. Audible gasps rose from the assembled press as the evidence played out in high definition. "What makes this incident particularly egregious," Jasmine continued, "is not just that it happened, but that the airline's immediate response was to attempt to silence us rather than address the underlying issues. We have since discovered this as part of a pattern spanning years, possibly decades, in which similar incidents were systematically buried through settlements and non-disclosure agreements." She detailed their demands: a complete overhaul of discrimination complaint procedures, mandatory bias training for all staff, an independent review board for passenger complaints, and transparent reporting of discrimination incidents across the industry. Then, in a move that hadn't been planned, Jasmine stepped aside. "My daughter has asked to speak briefly, and I believe her perspective deserves to be heard." Zoe approached the microphone, which Chin quickly adjusted to her height. For a moment, the child seemed overwhelmed by the sea of faces and cameras before her. Then she unfolded a small piece of paper and began reading in a clear, steady voice. "My name is Zoe Washington. I'm 7 years old and in 2nd grade. My mom is the best doctor in Atlanta and the best mom in the world. When people are mean to her because of her skin color, she always stays brave and kind. But that doesn't make it okay." Zoe looked up from her paper, her gaze direct and unflinching. "I kept track of how people treat us differently because I thought if grown-ups saw it through a kid's eyes, they might understand how much it hurts. Not just my mom's feelings, but my feelings too, because I have to watch it happen." The room had fallen completely silent, captivated by the child's articulate testimony. "When that flight attendant tried to hit my mom, I wasn't surprised, because I've been watching bad things build up for a long time. What surprised me was that people finally helped us instead of looking away." She folded her paper carefully. "I don't want other kids to have to protect their parents on airplanes or anywhere else. I want grown-ups to fix the problem so kids like me can just be kids. Thank you." As Zoe stepped back, the room erupted in applause and questions. Social media exploded with reactions to the powerful testimony. Within hours, clips of Zoe's speech had been viewed millions of times, shared by everyone from classroom teachers to members of Congress. The tide of public opinion, already flowing in their favor, became an unstoppable current. Atlantic Airways' stock price dropped 7% by market close. Former employees began coming forward with their own stories of witness discrimination and corporate cover-ups. That evening, as Jasmine and Zoe returned to their hotel room, they found it filled with flowers, cards, and messages of support from across the country. Among them was a handwritten note from Maria Gonzalez, 20 years in this industry, and I've never seen anything change. Until today. Thank you both for your courage. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, emotionally and physically exhausted but filled with a sense of purpose she hadn't anticipated when this ordeal began. She watched as Zoe carefully added new entries to her journal, no longer documenting injustice, but recording messages of hope from strangers who had been moved by their stand. "Mom?" Zoe asked without looking up from her writing. "Yes, sweetie. Are we going to win?" Jasmine considered the complexity of what winning might mean in this context. It wasn't just about legal victories or financial compensation. It was about changing entrenched systems, about making spaces safer not just for themselves but for everyone who would come after them. "I think," she said slowly, "we already have. No matter what happens next, you've shown me, shown everyone, that speaking up matters. That staying silent doesn't protect us the way I thought it did." Zoe nodded solemnly. "Grandma always says the truth has to come to light sometime. I guess sometimes kids have to help grown-ups see it." Out of the mouths of babes, Jasmine thought, marveling at her daughter's wisdom. In trying to shield Zoe from the harsh realities of discrimination, she had underestimated not only her daughter's awareness but her capacity for courage and moral clarity. As Jasmine prepared for bed that night, her phone lit up with an urgent notification. The board of directors at Atlantic Airways had called an emergency meeting. The headline that followed made her breath catch. Airline CEO steps down amid discrimination scandal, board announces zero tolerance policy overhaul. It was just the beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. And it had started because a 7-year-old refused to look away. 6 months later, Jasmine stood in the gleaming headquarters of Atlantic Airways, gazing out floor-to-ceiling windows at planes taking off and landing in the distance. Behind her, executives and legal teams were putting the final touches on documents that would fundamentally transform how the airline, and potentially the entire industry, addressed discrimination. "Dr. Washington." A young assistant approached. "They're ready for you in the boardroom." Jasmine nodded, smoothing her blazer before following the assistant down the corridor. The journey to this moment had been arduous but transformative, filled with challenges she couldn't have anticipated and victories she hadn't dared to hope for. In the weeks following their press conference, Atlantic Airways had initially attempted to weather the storm with cosmetic changes and public relations campaigns. But as Zoe's videos continued to circulate and more employees came forward with corroborating accounts, the company's position became increasingly untenable. Shareholders demanded action. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The Department of Transportation launched a formal investigation into industry-wide discrimination practices. The turning point came when 3 other major airlines announced comprehensive anti-bias initiatives, positioning themselves as industry leaders in response to the public outcry. Facing both competitive pressure and legal liability, Atlantic Airways board had finally ousted CEO Douglas Williams and reached out to Jasmine's legal team with a serious proposal for systemic change. The boardroom fell silent as Jasmine entered. Where once she might have felt intimidated by the row of executives in expensive suits, she now moved with the confidence of someone who had discovered her own power. Beside her walked Eleanor Chen, whose legal brilliance had helped transform a personal injury case into a landmark civil rights victory. Dar. Washington, the new CEO, Patricia Alvarez, rose to greet her. "Thank you for joining us today. We're prepared to sign the final agreement." The document before them represented months of negotiation and compromise. Atlantic Airways committed to a complete overhaul of their discrimination complaint system, with independent third-party review. Mandatory comprehensive anti-bias training for all staff, designed with input from civil rights experts. Transparent quarterly reporting of all passenger complaints involving potential discrimination. A diverse passenger advisory board with actual authority to recommend policy changes. Financial penalties for executives if discrimination incidents weren't properly addressed. A significant financial settlement for Jasmine and Zoe, without any non-disclosure requirements. Most significantly, a new passenger protection policy would be named the Zoe Washington Protocol, a formal recognition of the child whose courage and foresight had catalyzed these changes. "Before we proceed," Jasmine said, "I want to confirm that Heather Reynolds and Captain Mitchell are being held accountable." Patricia nodded gravely. "Ms. Reynolds' employment has been terminated, and she is ineligible for rehire across our partner airlines. Captain Mitchell has been demoted from captain status and required to complete extensive retraining before potentially being reconsidered for command positions. Their handling of the incident was completely unacceptable by any standard." "And Maria Gonzalez?" A small smile crossed Patricia's face. "Ms. Gonzalez has been promoted to lead flight attendant trainer, with a special focus on our new cultural competency program. Her courage in coming forward was instrumental in helping us understand how deeply these problems ran within our culture." As the signing ceremony proceeded, Jasmine reflected on the broader impacts of their stand. The hospital administration that had pressured her to resolve the situation quickly had publicly reversed course when faced with outrage from medical staff and patients alike. Jasmine had not only retained her position but had been appointed to chair a new committee on equity in patient care. Tyler Bennett had used his corporate connections to establish an industry consortium committed to addressing discrimination in customer service across multiple sectors. The elderly Fitzgeralds had become unexpected social media stars, using their platform to encourage other, seasoned citizens, to speak up when they witnessed injustice. Keisha Johnson had developed a school curriculum based on the incident, teaching students about bystander intervention and civic responsibility. But the most profound changes had occurred within Jasmine's relationship with Zoe. The walls of silence Jasmine had built to protect her daughter had come down. They now talked openly about the realities of racism, both the painful challenges and the inspiring progress being made by people working for change. Instead of shielding Zoe from difficult truths, Jasmine had embraced her daughter's perceptiveness as a strength to be nurtured rather than a vulnerability to be guarded. After the signing, Jasmine was invited to address Atlantic Airways' executive leadership team about her experience. As she spoke about the importance of listening to those who experience discrimination rather than dismissing their concerns, she noticed several executives taking notes, their expressions thoughtful rather than defensive. "The most important lesson I hope you take from this," she concluded, "is that meaningful change requires more than good intentions. It demands accountability, transparency, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. My daughter taught me that pretending problems don't exist doesn't make them disappear, it only allows them to grow in the shadows. Later that afternoon, Jasmine met Zoe at her school. The little girl ran to her mother with a drawing she'd made in art class, a colorful depiction of diverse people holding hands around an airplane. My teacher says I'm going to be in history books someday, Zoe announced as they walked to the car. Jasmine smiled. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. Can we fly to visit Aunt Monique next month? Zoe asked. I want to see if the new rules are working. The question gave Jasmine pause. Despite all the changes, the thought of boarding another plane still triggered anxiety. But she refused to let fear limit their lives. Yes, we can. And you can bring your journal, just in case. Zoe grinned. I already packed it. 6 weeks later, Jasmine and Zoe boarded an Atlantic Airways flight to New York. As they settled into their seats, a flight attendant approached, a young black woman with warm eyes and a professional demeanor. Dr. and Ms. Washington, she greeted them with genuine respect. It's an honor to have you on board. I completed the Zoe Washington protocol training last month, and I want you to know it's already making a difference in how we approach our work. As the flight progressed, Jasmine observed subtle but meaningful changes throughout the service. The crew demonstrated consistent courtesy to all passengers. When a minor issue arose with another traveler, it was handled promptly and respectfully. The captain made a point of personally greeting several passengers from diverse backgrounds during his cabin walkthrough. Midway through the flight, Zoe leaned over to whisper in her mother's ear. Mom, I haven't had to write down anything bad in my journal. Just good stuff. Jasmine wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, feeling a complex mixture of emotions, pride in what they had accomplished, hope for continued progress, and a deepened appreciation for Zoe's wisdom and courage. Sometimes, she told Zoe, the most important changes start with one person brave enough to say, this isn't right. You taught me that. As their plane descended toward New York, Jasmine gazed out at the skyline coming into view. The journey that had begun with fear and humiliation had transformed into something powerful and affirming. By refusing to be silenced, by insisting that their dignity mattered, they had helped create ripples that would benefit countless others they would never meet. Not every story of discrimination ended this way. Too many injustices still went unchallenged, too many voices unheard. But change happened one story, one stand, one brave truth-teller at a time. And sometimes, that truth-teller was a 7-year-old with a journal and an unshakable sense of right and wrong. The aircraft touched down smoothly, and as passengers prepared to deplane, Jasmine noticed something she hadn't seen on their previous flights, a prominently displayed placard with information about passenger rights and the airline's non-discrimination policy, complete with a QR code for reporting concerns. Look, Mom, Zoe pointed excitedly. They used my suggestion. Indeed, at the bottom of the placard was a simple but powerful statement, inspired by Zoe Washington. Because everyone deserves dignity in the skies. It wasn't perfect. No single policy change could eradicate the deep-rooted problems of systemic racism. But it was progress, tangible, measurable progress that would make the journey safer and more equitable for the next family that boarded. And that, Jasmine thought as she took her daughter's hand, was a victory worth celebrating. This powerful story reminds us that confronting discrimination requires both courage and evidence. Jasmine's professional composure combined with Zoe's meticulous documentation created an undeniable case that couldn't be dismissed or silenced. It teaches us that even children perceive racism's subtle dynamics, often with clarity adults have learned to suppress. The transformation at Atlantic Airways demonstrates that systemic change is possible when accountability replaces denial. Organizations resist change until the cost of maintaining the status quo exceeds the cost of reform, a threshold reached through public pressure, irrefutable evidence, and unwavering determination. Perhaps most importantly, this story challenges our instinct to shield children from difficult realities. Jasmine discovered that her attempts to protect Zoe by remaining silent actually left her daughter carrying the burden alone. True protection comes through honest conversations and empowering children with tools to understand and navigate injustice. The ripple effects, from hospital policies to classroom curricula, remind us that individual stands against discrimination can catalyze broader transformation. When we refuse to accept, "This is just how things are," we create space for, "This is how things could be." Finally, Zoe's journal reveals the power of documentation. In a world that often dismisses marginalized voices, evidence transforms personal testimony into undeniable truth. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply recording what we see. Have you ever witnessed discrimination but stayed silent? What would you do if faced with a similar situation in public? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful accounts of everyday courage. Don't forget to share with someone who needs this message of hope and accountability. Thank you for watching, and remember, in the fight against racism, both speaking up and documenting truth are acts of profound courage.